Hi, I'm William Vokey. Please make a donation to Carnegie's annual fund. Your donations directly support programs like the video you're about to watch. These are difficult times. Help keep alive these voices for ethics. Visit carnegiecouncil.org, click the heading Mark Support. Thanks.
One of the points of my book is that American abortion politics actually end up having a bigger impact on the lives of women worldwide than they do on the lives of women here at home. There's actually only so much that one president to the next can do. We're protected, they chip away at the edges, but we're basically protected by Roe versus Wade. You don't see wild swings from when a Democrat is in office or a Republican is in office. Whereas abroad, that's quite different, because of the global gag rule, because of whether or not we fund UNFPA, the makeup of diplomatic missions, the kind of politicization of the aid bureaucracy. You see huge changes from one president to the next. Clinics closing in, whole parts of a country, reopening when the next president comes along, closing when the next president comes along. You see a huge difference in whether, the U.S. delegation, and the U.S. is still the major world power, whether the U.S. delegation is over there caucusing with Iran and Sudan, or whether the U.S. is leading the charge, as it did during the Clinton years for this kind of expanded definition of reproductive rights as human rights. And Hillary Clinton was a champion for this, has been for a long time. She gave a speech in 1995 in Beijing about women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights once and for all. And I think that now that she's Secretary of State, we're going to see, and one of the things I think is going to be most interesting is to see is what does a foreign policy that takes women and girls' rights seriously really look like? And the first big changes have all been to these kind of really backward-looking policies on reproductive rights. So they get rid of the global gag rule. They restore funding to the United Nations Population Fund. They get rid of, at home, a lot of this abstinence-only stuff. And now I think we're going to see, the other day Hillary Clinton was in a congressional hearing, and Congressman Chris Smith, who, anyone should, if you haven't seen this, you should really Google it. I mean, it's really astonishing. Congressman Chris Smith, who's who's been very much a leader of the kind of global anti-abortion movement, is constantly intervening in other countries whenever they're thinking about liberalizing their abortion laws, was questioning her and saying, are you going to, or is the United States now going to try to undermine anti-abortion legislation in Africa or in Latin America? And I won't even try to paraphrase it, but she gave this reply, the most kind of eloquent and strong and unconditional reply about reproductive rights are human rights, reproductive right, talking about the horrors that she's seen around the world because of the lack of reproductive rights from, hospitals in Brazil where half the women are there delivering babies and half the women are there recuperating from botched abortions, and seeing the toll that child motherhood takes in Africa, and suffering that she's seen in Asia. And she basically said, you're free to push your policies on the world stage, and so are we, and we believe that reproductive rights are fundamental, and that abortion rights are a component of reproductive rights. I mean, you couldn't have imagined a kind of, not just, if I may, it was a better summary of my book than I could ever sit up here and give you, but it also just marked a sea change in the American approach to these things.